Hey y'all, who dat and welcome in. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. First things first, thanks everyone for listening. I do want to apologize. This week kind of got crazy. We had the holiday on Monday, so we didn't record our typical episode. And then we had Drew Brees Day on Thursday, which wasn't necessarily a surprise in the sense that we didn't know it was coming, but it did take a whole lot longer than I thought it would personally. So I wasn't able to record anything yesterday. So I'm recording this on Friday morning. It's going to be on the shorter side for our episode. It's also going to be a little all over the place because it's a good bit I want to cover. I'm going to cover three distinct topics. We're going to go segment one, segment two, segment three. So strap it. First segment, we're going to talk all Drew Brees. It was Drew Brees' day. We're going to give him his flowers at the top of this show, and it's about damn time he got some flowers in New Orleans, and we'll get to that in a minute. Second segment, we're going to play an interview that Steve Geller and I did with Jonathan Stinchcomb, talking about the offensive line, talking about Sean Payton's return, talking about all of that good stuff. And then the final segment, I want to dive into a subject that we talked about kind of in passing in the last episode, but I want to play some audio that kind of explains what I'm talking about in terms of this Saints defense is going to get kind of a trial by fire all throughout training camp against the defense that they've struggled against. And I think that's going to be a factor, right? So we're going to dive into that. But first things first, Drew Brees. Man, I love me some Drew Brees. I miss me some Drew Brees. Drew Brees got inducted, let's be clear. Drew Brees got announced as the 2024 inductee into the New Orleans Saints Team Hall of Fame. And that's not a surprise. It's one of the least surprising announcements that you'll ever hear. The only question to me was whether they would do it at the first opportunity or whether they'd maybe give it a year or two. But yeah, so 3 years removed, you can be inducted into the Team Hall of Fame. It was unanimous. They also made the, I would argue, very smart decision of putting Drew into the Team Hall of Fame by himself. You know, typically you'll have two players, maybe three, go in at the same time. Drew got his day alone, and he deserved it. I mean, alone, he also is joined by Doug Moreau, who's a longtime press box announcer, PA announcer. He got the Joe Gimelli Fleur-de-Lis Award, very deserving. Fans of the Saints, you might not know him personally, but if you're ever in the press box, you know him, and he's very helpful. But I think he's been there forever. He deserves every bit of that award. And I thought his speech was fantastic as well. But we don't have time to go into all of it. We're going to talk about Drew Brees. And, you know, one of the things that really stood out to me in terms of why yesterday or Thursday's press conference was so poignant is that it kind of felt like a retirement press conference. And it felt that way because we never actually got a retirement press conference, like a proper retirement press conference for Drew Brees, which is what you get, you know, like when Peyton Manning retired, or, you know, like when these legendary quarterbacks retire, typically you're going to get this kind of tear-filled press conference, or at least guys who are retiring from the team that they've played for a long time. Tom Brady was never going to get a long, tearful goodbye from Tampa Bay, right? It just wasn't going to happen. But, you know, like when Peyton Manning left the Colts, there were tears, there was emotion. We just never got that for the Saints. We've talked to Drew Brees since. He obviously did the Instagram video. He went on Ellen and talked about it, but it wasn't the same, at least to me, in terms of going to the team facility, standing. Like, think about how Sean Payton was sent out the door, right? Like, Drew Brees deserves something like that, and he never got it. Why? Because he retired following the 2020 season, and COVID was a thing. So you couldn't do that. You couldn't have a group of people in a room. And just for perspective, typically these these Hall of Fame press conferences, which they do every year, they're kind of a ho-hum affair. Typically, they're in the standard media room. This one, they knew it was going to be a room filled with people, and they needed as much seating as possible. So it was kind of neat because they actually did it in the team meeting room, like the full team meeting room where they'll go over film study and such. Like if the Saints are ever on Hard Knocks, you'll end up seeing a lot of footage from that room. I'd never been in there. I don't think a lot of the Saints media corps had been in there. So it was kind of cool to get a look at how that room is used and what it looks like. And the seats are a lot more comfortable. But yeah, so I mean, it was everybody. It was the entire media corps, team personnel. I think Mickey Loomis had a prior engagement. He couldn't be there. But, Gail was there. Dennis Lauscha was there. Drew's family was there. His 3 sons, I don't know where his daughter was, but she wasn't there. But the 3 sons were there, and they're getting big. One of them might go to LSU. I don't know if he's going to play any sports, but hey, keep it in Louisiana. Eric McCoy, Taysom Hill, Josh Hill, Cam Jordan were there, and it was kind of cool because they're all there for OTAs, so they're kind of sneaking in between meetings. And after Drew got off, Cam kind of sneaked out because he's got stuff to do. But I just appreciate it because Drew deserved a lot more of a send-off than he got. And to me, more frustrating than Jared Cook not being able to hold on to a football or, that very winnable AFC or NFC divisional round playoff game slipping away. And the lasting memory being 3 interceptions and that kind of glance over his shoulder as he walked out the door. The most frustrating thing for me was that it happened in front of 8,000, 10,000 fans, right? That afterward, we only got to talk to Drew on a Zoom call, and it was so impersonal. And it just, for the career that he had, for the meaningful impact that he had for this city, for this state, for the NFL, it was so impersonal. And, one of the quotes from yesterday is talking about, okay, why did he retire? And, it's kind of nice getting this interview 3 years later because I think Drew's willing to say a lot more than he would have been willing to a month after, 2 months after, right? And so this quote here, he's talking about, why he stepped away. And this is the quote that really kind of got picked up on. And he said stuff like this before, but I don't know if he said it this matter-of-factly. And so here's what Drew had to say about why he ultimately retired.
Yeah. No, I'd say, it's just being perfectly honest, but, I don't know if there's ever an easy way to leave the game, right? I mean, I guess unless you're just, lifting up the Lombardi Trophy and riding off into the sunset, which is what we had all hoped for, But certainly to have it be in a situation like that where you're not able to really be there with the fans and celebrate it with all those who are, so important. I felt like there was a little bit of a lack of closure, And honestly, man, if my right arm was still working, I probably would have played another 3 years. My body feels great. My body could play, my right arm can't. And so, unfortunately, that's what kind of forced me to step away. And it was time too, But yeah, I try not to think about like the glance back in the dome because I wish it would have been with a packed house, and just like that energy that is so synonymous with the Superdome, and that I'll always remember, and that what we always fed off of, every game day. My image of the dome is much different than that last moment.
Drew, how seriously did you? There was talk about in 21 about potentially maybe coming back for a period of time. Like, how seriously did you consider that?
Very serious. Very. I'll just leave it at that.
What prevented it? Was it the arm?
Yeah. I mean, at the end, yeah. At the end of the day, it's like how capable, right? How capable am I to do the job, right? I mean, I would have run QB draws. I would have done whatever. I would have run some veer option. We would have pulled out all the stops. I was ready. Pull out the high school playbook. Yeah.
How's your arm now? I mean, can you throw now? Do you throw to boys?
I do throw. How do I throw, boys? Look, I can drop a dime like 30 yards left-handed. Unfortunately, you need a little bit more than that to to compete at this level. But yeah, I throw left-handed with the boys with everything. Anything below the my shoulder, below the waist, so any racket sports, golf, that's fine. It's just when it gets up here, just a lot of wear and tear. And look, Dr. Andrews told me that. He said at some point, he's like, you're on the fast track to a degenerative shoulder. And so at some point, you know, this will catch up with you. Like just all that wear and tear and all the work that was done. And, you know, so it's like, because I used to use this term, prolong my prime. It was like, how long can I just prolong my prime, you know, and then unfortunately there will be attrition at some point. And yeah, hung on as long as I could.
I would love to play the entire I would love to play a lot of this press conference for you. I would love to play it. It was 37 minutes long. The problem is any answer I play is going to be like 5 minutes long. So it's going to end up being a very long segment very quickly because he just had a lot to say. And that's what these press conferences, that retirement type press conference is for, to let it all out, to tell everyone, you know, all this stuff that maybe you were keeping, you know, under the vest. And so I'll have to paraphrase a lot, but, you know, he talked about his contributions to the he was asked about his contributions to the city. And, you know, he talked about, like what I care most about is like the teammates and the people. He said he has a picture of his offensive line, right? Jonathan Stinchcomb, Carl Nix, Jonathan Goodwin, Jari Evans, and Jermon Bushrod. I think Zach Streif's in there as well. He was a jumbo tight end from the Super Bowl year. And he got emotional, right? Like, because this is emotional stuff. It was 15 years of his life that he spent, you know, serving the city. And he obviously made a lot of money in the process. And he set a lot of records. And he's getting his accolades and he deserves them. But, you know, it was meaningful. And I appreciate, you know, as frustrating as it's been the last few years and kind of how difficult things have been. And, you know, for perspective, they have basically a 500 record over the last 3 years. It's not like they're terrible. Not like the Saints have been terrible, but it's been a struggle. It's been difficult. One of those years with Sean Payton, they went 9-8. Two of those years have been with Dennis Allen. They went 7-10 and 9-8. Right. So, you know, it's not like they've gone to the bottom of the barrel, but I think you know, those last few years with Drew, and now that we know just how much his arm was letting him down toward the end, I think we get kind of a fresh perspective of how easy he made things look and how good Saints fans really had it. And this isn't a slight on Derek Carr. This is just any quarterback walking into that situation following Drew Brees was going to have a hard time. It was always going to happen. And but I do think you know, one of the things that I appreciate is going through this most recent stretch has given people a greater appreciation for how good they had it with the heyday of Sean and Drew. And I hope that people did appreciate it while it was going on, right? Like I really do. I really hope that people genuinely took the time during that period to understand, hey, this is a generational type thing. This is not how it's going to be all the time. Because now I think people are figuring that out. So I hope you took the time to enjoy it while it was happening. But for perspective, and like I had a comment on here, and you know, I should stop taking every comment necessarily at their word. This person was probably just trolling. But there was a comment on here recently that was like, I think people might be overrating Drew Brees. Let's see if he makes it into the Hall of Fame. And I was like, are you serious, or are you trolling? And I think they probably were trolling, or they're just unaware. So, you know, the last thing I'll do here, and again, if you want to go check out that full press conference, I highly recommend it. Like, it's worth listening to. There's a lot in there. He also said he's interested in getting back into broadcasting at some point. The travel schedule was an issue, right? But I wouldn't be surprised. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets into coaching at some point. But it would be after his kids have kind of grown up and it's no longer a scheduling issue for him. But what I want to hit you with is kind of a list of accolades, and this is not an exhaustive list. It would take hours to go through an exhaustive list. But you're talking about, you know, and the Saints put out some of these stats, right? Talking about 13-time Pro Bowler, 571 career touchdown passes, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, should have been an MVP at least once, probably more than once. You know, he led the NFL in completion percentage 6 times. He was the first quarterback to 80,000 passing yards. He was the first quarterback to 5,000 completions. Now, one thing that I'll mention before going on further is I do think that it's notable. He said, hey, I could have played 3 more years. Why? Because wouldn't you know it, the guy who passed Drew's records in terms of passing yardage, completion, whatever, Tom Brady. You know how many more years he had in the NFL than Drew Brees? 3, right? If Drew Brees had played 3 more years, what would this press conference have been? Or what would we have had this year? There would have been a retirement press conference for Drew Brees. Like the reason he retired, like the reason we were able to have this press conference today is because he retired 3 years ago. And you have to be out of the NFL 3 years before you can be in the Team Hall of Fame. So, I do think the 3 years thing was relevant. Whether he can throw a good enough pass with his left hand to compete in an NFL game, I don't know. But here's a list, just a rundown of some of the NFL records that Drew Brees still does own. So not even including the ones that he retired with, which I still kind of give him in terms of, okay, if you gave him 3 more years of games, he would still have this. And, it's unfortunate that, we were robbed of that because that injury he had in San Diego, it all goes back to that injury in San Diego, right? Where he had to have his shoulder basically rebuilt. And it was always a question of, okay, it's not going to last forever. It's just going to be, hey, how long can you keep this? I think Drew's phrase was prolong his prime. He did it for a long time, caught up with him. But this is just a quick rundown of all the records he owns. So he owns the NFL record for most games with 120 plus passer rating. He did it 64 times. Most games with a 130 plus passer rating. He did it 42 times. Most games with 150 plus passer rating. He did it 3 times. Most seasons with a 100 passer rating over the entire season. He did it 9 times. Most seasons leading the NFL in completions, 6. He's tied with Dan Marino for that one. He has the NFL record for most completions per game in a season. That was 29.4 in 2016. So we're not even talking about like 2011, 2012. We're talking about 2016. Mid-30s, right? Most seasons with 400 plus completions. He did that 9 times. Most consecutive seasons with 400 plus completions. He did it 7 times in a row. Highest completion percentage in a single game. That was recent, 96.67%. That was in 2019 against the Colts, right? And keep in mind, like this, right, that record is insane because if you recall in 2019, he was coming back from that thumb injury that was like 2 games removed from his time off with a thumb injury. It completes 29 to 30 passes for 4 touchdowns, blows the Colts out of the water. Oh, continue. Highest completion percentage in a season. That was 74.4%, 2018. I think he got close to that. I think he has like the top 3. It's insane. Most games with at least 80% completions, 28. Most seasons with at least 70% completions, that's 5. Most seasons with 4,500 plus passing yards, he did it 8 times. Most seasons with 5,000 plus passing yards, he did it 3 times. Now, again, only 12 people have done this in like the history of the NFL. Drew Brees has done it 5 times. And I remember back when it was happening, everyone was like, yeah, it's just the NFL now. Like pretty soon people like, we threw up for 6,000 yards. Well, where are they? Right? It seems like the passing yardage is going down. So put some respect on my man Drew here. Most games with 350 plus passing yards, that's 63. Most games with 400 plus passing yards, 16. Most consecutive 350 plus passing yard games, 4. He had 4 consecutive 350 yard passing games. Think about that. Fewest games to reach 80,000 passing yards. He did it in 286. So that's the record I look at. It's like, yeah, okay, Tom did it, but he did it in like 15 more games. First QB ever to reach 7,000 pass completions. Most seasons with 30 plus passing TDs, 10. Most passing TDs in a game, 7. He's tied with 7 others, which this is such a crazy list when you look at it because it's not necessarily a list of like all-time great quarterbacks, but there are some all-time great quarterbacks on here. So you have Sid Luckman, Adrian Burke, George Blando, Y.I. Tittle, Joe Kapp, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and then Nick Foles. And Nick Foles, he did that with the Eagles. That one year, Brian Kelly, everyone's like, oh my, not Brian Kelly, Chip Kelly. Oh, I was like, oh my God, Chip Kelly and Nick Foles are going to be the talk of the town. He had 7 touchdowns in the game. Anyway, if you remember, that game was a game against the Giants, that crazy game where Eli Manning threw for 6, right? For whatever reason, all these guys have gotten to 7, but no one's been able to get to 8, not even Drew. So we'll see. But most games with 5 plus passing touchdowns, 11. He did that 11 times. And then finally, he's one of just 4 NFL QBs all time to beat 32 NFL teams. And, obviously there haven't always been 32 NFL teams. So you kind of got to take that for what it's worth in terms of the time period where that could have happened. But let's listen to the list of the players who have done it. So it's Brees, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. Now, that's one hell of a list to be on. But I will say it's notable that of these 4 players, Drew is the only one that did it the way he did it, which is he beat the Saints back when he was with the Chargers. And then he beat everyone else, or at least, you get the idea. He did a majority of the rest of it with the Saints, and he retired with the Saints. The other 3 guys, Brett Favre retired as a member of the Vikings, or at least his final season was with the Vikings. Peyton Manning, his final season was with the Broncos. Tom Brady, his final season was with the Bucs. And, say what you want. I would have loved to see Drew win another Super Bowl. He deserved another Super Bowl. 2018 will always go down for me as one of the most disappointing, bullshit, garbage results of a game that will ever happen. You'll never see another game like that. Or I sure hope you don't. But I prefer it in terms of at least he didn't go somewhere else and win a Super Bowl. Like, if that's the cost, if the cost of Drew not getting another Super Bowl is that he was able to stay here his entire career and retire as a member of this community, fine. Because, like, one of the grossest things that happens in the NFL is these Hall of Fame quarterbacks just end up having to go somewhere else to finish up their careers. And you didn't have to do that with Drew. And, you might be paying the cost of it now, because one of the reasons that Brett Favre didn't get to retire at Packer is because they had Aaron Rodgers and they're like, okay, we're gonna go with this guy. Peyton Manning, well, that was kind of weird, but they had the number 1 pick in the draft. They took Andrew Luck. Makes sense. Tom Brady, that was probably a bad decision by the Patriots. But whatever. Either way, Drew Brees deserves every bit of it. He is that good. And if you're even questioning for a second whether you're going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, don't waste your time, because he is. And yeah, hopefully the Saints can get back to something even close to that. I'll leave you with one final note, and it's from Sean Payton.
And when I called back today, someone was telling me that that he was going in. I don't know which game will be the game that maybe.
I'm just saying, week 7, do it, baby. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. We're going to come back. I'm going to play you an interview Steve Geller and I were able to do recently with Jonathan Stinchcomb. Stick around for that. And then the final segment, we're going to talk about, one of the wild cards for this defense this year. We're going to hear from Dennis Allen, a couple players on that. So who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. Subscribe and stick around. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak, coming at you solo for a quick episode. This is Friday morning. Weird schedule. Obviously, posting a podcast episode on Friday is not optimal, but I did want to get you an episode, so we're getting you an episode. And this next segment is going to be an interview that myself and Steve Geller were able to do with another member of that 2009 Super Bowl championship team, Jonathan Stinchcomb. Offensive lineman, played right tackle for the Saints for a long time. And I think he's got some great insight into what the Saints are looking at this year, what Trevor Penning is dealing with. He's also going to talk about Sean Payton's return, how he kind of expects that and that greeting to go from fans, or at least how he hopes it'll go, and kind of his ideas for the season. So without further ado, here's John.
How did you feel about the draft pick of Talaiesi Fuaga for this team in the first round out of Oregon State?
I think it's huge. Sadly, I think we were in a predicament where we needed to have some instant infusion of not only youth but talent. And obviously they went out and got the best offensive tackle available. Now for him, it's going to be how quickly can he get up to speed, because the Saints need him to be game ready right now. And, that's a tall order for any rookie, but having watched some of his film now, he certainly seems like he's got the physical traits to really have that high ceiling. There's a reason why they drafted him so high in that first round.
Yeah, John, obviously one of the storylines early on, and we'll be talking about it throughout all camp, is, okay, left side, right side. Fuaga has been working on the left side, even though he played on the right pretty much exclusively in college to get some work in at the left side. And then when you're moving Trevor over to the right, I guess just for the average person, it's kind of, I think Fuaga described it as kind of like driving on the other side of the road. How difficult is that to make that flip across the line? Because we've seen guys like James Hurst do it, but it does seem like something that feels like a wild card of, okay, can you do that successfully in one off season? And what are the difficulties there?
Yes, I think you can absolutely make that kind of switch. I think it's probably more of a body mechanics is different. It's all mirrored, but understanding spacing and engagement, I think there's a bigger change when you go from interior to an edge position, so like guard to tackle, than it is going right to left. Yeah, I feel like he'll be able to pick that up, that transition up pretty easily. It's just a mirror, if you will, of body mechanics. That's the biggest transition.
With Trevor Penning now moving over to the right side from left tackle and called it a fresh start for him. And just curious what you think about that. I mean, he struggled obviously on the left side, and I don't imagine things are going to be any easier obviously at right.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of confidence for him. When he first was drafted, the understanding was this is a really high ceiling player, but is going to need time to develop. And, unfortunately, that first season was marred by injuries. He didn't get the practice reps that he needed to develop. And then year two, you force him onto the field because of need and because it's a year removed from him being the first round pick, and it was pretty evident that he just wasn't ready. And hopefully this is exactly what he needs. He's had a year of good practice time, and now it's kind of a fresh start, and hopefully that transition is one that's a pleasant one for him. I think the bigger question is Ryan Ramczyk's health. Overall, big picture, that's going to be a question that needs to be answered relatively quickly for these Saints to have the season that they want.
I was kind of looking at this today. If Ryan isn't out there this season, you end up really turning over this offensive line from a veteran kind of laden group with Pete and Hurst and Ryan over there to Fuaga. You're talking about a rookie. Penning's only 24. Saldiveri's 24. But I look at it as, okay, Clint's bringing in this scheme. And, whether you were planning on this or not, this scheme is going to emphasize kind of the athleticism of that group a little bit more. And I kind of look at it as, okay, if you ever needed a more athletic group out there, this is probably the year. This is probably the scheme with that wide zone blocking. I'm just curious what you think about that, because this feels like a pretty athletic offensive line when you look at even like Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz. They're pretty good athletes at their position.
It will certainly be a transition from what we've seen, and I think it probably plays very well to what Penning and even Fuaga, what
Right.
they've done well or what we've seen from them is, athleticism and physicality in the run game and the ability to, transition that into play action pass more than just drop back pass, which the expectations are you can do everything all the time, but reality usually dictates that some players fit better, and this might be a better fit for Penning than the Carmichael offense that he was asked to perform in. So, both guys, Brees and their physical traits and what they did really well coming out of college. So how they pick up the system and how they fit in is going to be a real big deciding factor as to how well this offense can perform.
John Benton, the new offensive line coach, just interested obviously to see how some of these guys now react to his tutelage, because under Doug Marrone, I don't know, things weren't going so well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all starts with you have that high first-round draft pick, and that doesn't really pan out. And there was such a shuffling that ended up occurring with Hurst and Pete basically switching positions this past year from where they were the year before, and it was a rough transition. So I think really if we're taking that zoom out, that's kind of the state of this offensive line is it's been a little bit in flux. And there's been some heavy investment in some youth and high ceiling talent. And it might take a year or two for that to develop, but no fan wants to hear that before the start of the season.
Yeah, just kind of going a little further on that and kind of taking that wider view of this team and this season. It doesn't seem like they're getting a lot of respect from, odds makers, from kind of the national pundits in terms of expectations. But what is your kind of confidence level in this year, this team? It does seem like they are taking a longer view in some of the decision making and some of the investments in terms of salary cap, kind of rebuilding that. But what is your view on this season for this team?
Well, I'm a total homer, but
there you go.
I think it's tempered. to be a little bit measured here. I think that you just look overall, and there are some teams that probably a little further along in their development, and there's some positions of rebuild. And I think you look at the staff, and that's been recognized as well, kind of a change in direction with new OC, new offensive line coach. You're bringing in some younger players, and that's kind of married with some of the veterans. So I don't think this is a total rebuild by any means, and I do think this is a very winnable division. But it's going to be players outperforming expectations to reach some of those goals. Not saying that it's inconceivable, but I think we're probably, if you're trying to give an more unbiased opinion, we're probably more middle of the pack, looking to kind of add pieces and project more next year potentially. But again, nobody really wants to hear that this time of year.
John, I am perfectly okay with you being a homer. Just wanted to get that out there.
Good.
That's what I'm here for. This is homer time of year right now. If you're all doom and gloom in May, then to me that's more about you than anything else. But I do have one more question. It's obviously you're changing to Clint Kubiak, you're doing all this. Is it kind of a strange feeling to kind of see this offense change, just because it's been the same for so long? Even Sean left, Drew left, you still ran the same offense, and you were in that offense. It's going to look a lot different when this team gets out there on the field. And I just, as someone who was in it, is that kind of a weird feeling to kind of watch this team change for the first time since 2006, at least on offense?
It is, and I think, there comes a time where you almost need to infuse a new energy. And obviously, I think when that transition was made at the head coach position, it was more of, we like where we're at. We don't need to make some major changes. Let's see if we can make this run with a lot of the pieces that we already have in place. And, I think now you're looking at it going, maybe a little new juice isn't going to hurt. And specifically with the offense, I'm a huge Pete Carmichael fan and Sean Payton as well, but I think we all agree that this last season we were hoping to see a little more life for the offense. And, obviously the OC and the quarterback usually take the heat the first and the loudest. But I'm excited. I think it's a good opportunity for New Orleans to kind of breathe in some new energy in a space that may have gotten a little stagnant.
One last thing is, with Sean Payton coming back to the Superdome Week 7, what do you think that reception's going to be like from the Who Dat Nation?
Well, knowing fans, my hope is that they appreciate the fact that he brought New Orleans its first and only Super Bowl and stayed committed to that city and the development of the organization. Having been a part of it before he arrived and understanding where the bar was raised, I'm eternally grateful for the direction that Coach Payton and Mickey Loomis and the Benson family was able to invest in New Orleans. And, obviously the bar has been raised. So my hope would be that fans could express their appreciation. I understand where some of the boos might come, but I think for most of the fan base, they recognize all that Sean has done for the organization in our city, and I'm expecting, at least I'm hopeful, that there's going to be a round of cheers for him.
All right, closing out this segment. Thanks again to Jonathan Stinchcomb for coming on WWL with myself and Steve Geller. You can check out our show every Friday, 4 to 8 p.m. They let us on there. I don't know why, but they do. But yeah, I thought John had some, had some interesting points there, and that's what we've heard in terms of, hey, switching sides of the line at the tackle position is very doable. Now, switching from guard to tackle, switching from tackle to guard, much more difficult. And that's why people are like, oh, try him at guard. That's a shift. That's a whole new position, at least at tackle, and I think people are downplaying a little bit, like, that just switching across the line is not something that should be scoffed at. It's like, of course, everyone can do this. Some guys can do it better than others. I will say for Trevor, he at least doesn't have all of this ingrained NFL experience that he's got to forget. He's only started, 6 games at left tackle. So I think it should be reasonably simple for him to just reverse everything. But that's kind of where you're at this year. And I think this is the project, right? You have Trevor this year. You're like, hey, I still think he's a tackle. The Saints still think he's a tackle. I still think he's a tackle. Like, everything about him screams tackle. The athleticism is there to play tackle. It is all about getting the feet right, getting the technique right, making decisions, making the right decisions, doing the right things. And hopefully that can be the case this year. Now, if it doesn't work out, guard is an option. But that's a whole nother project. And you want to figure out if he can be a tackle first. And frankly, you just have not given him enough of a chance to do that, in my opinion. I think Stinch would agree. A couple other things. I think, it's telling that, Stinch would call himself a homer. And I mean, you're a former player. You should be a homer, right? Like, I'm a homer. I try to be honest about my expectations, but come on, at the end of the day, I'm a homer. Because I want the team to win. If you think I'm sitting here, rather being right, like, anytime I say I think the Saints are going to lose this week and they win, I'm thrilled to be wrong. Right? Like, I would much rather the Saints win than I be right. Know that. And I think Stitch is in the same boat. But even he's being cautiously optimistic, right? Like, he's setting the stage for, like, guys, I think this is a 2-year thing. And that's the frustrating part, is how much runway do you give this group? That's the tough part, is what happens if you look and you get to the end of the year and you're like, we put in a new offense. It didn't work. Or people are picking it up and it looked good at the end. What if you have the same season as last year, right? What if the exact same thing plays out where, the offense just has kind of a failure to launch in the first half of the season, but then you finish like gangbusters and you blow up and you're like, we will, do you go into the offseason with the same mentality? I don't know, but that's a bridge we can cross when we get there. Hopefully it's not the case. Hopefully it's not, but all right. That's the end of that segment. I'm going to come back. I want to talk about the defense. I want to talk about one element of this offseason that's very unique for not just the offense, but the defense. So, all right, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. We'll be right back. And we're back. One more segment on Inside Black and Gold. And we're going to talk about the defense, kind of defense, offense, defense, this and that, whatever. But first things first, I'm Jeff Nowak. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. This was kind of funny. Micah Parsons, he's in Dallas. He's in Dallas. I had a friend text me and say he's a Jersey whore, and it seems like that could be true. There's a clip of Micah on the sidelines of the Mavericks Timberwolves Game 5, which they'll be playing the Celtics, and let's see how many games it takes them to lose that series to the Celtics. But that's neither here nor there. But he spots Dirk Nowitzki and he goes over and he gets him to sign his jersey. And Cam Jordan responded. And they kind of went back and forth, and Micah Parsons is like, you better have that jersey for me when we play each other. And Cam's like, we don't play each other. And Micah's like, yeah, we do. It's in week 2. So if when Cam Jordan tells you he's thinking one game at a time, he means it. He doesn't pay attention to who the week 2 opponent is, the week 3 opponent. I'm sure he knows, like, okay, we open with the Panthers and that's it. Except that week 7 game. That's circled too. But anyway, let's move forward. So one thing that I talked about in passing on the last episode, and I do want to dive a little more into it, is the advantage that exists. So we talk about Saints changing their offensive system, and great. Yeah, like that's something that they needed to do, and I think is important, and they've done it. But what is the secondary element of that? What about the group that goes against that? And it happens to be a group that has struggled against that type of offense. We saw in week 16, like we can attribute week 16 to being, hey, the Saints weren't ready, the Saints weren't prepared. It was a short week. They had to go out west, and they did, and all that's true. But they also just could not handle it. Like, it was running them ragged all day, particularly Alontae Taylor in the slot. And I thought Alontae had a solid year overall, right? Like, I thought that he had some really nice moments. He had his first career interception, or he had his first 2 career interceptions in back-to-back weeks at the end of the year. You know, that Packers game in week 3 was probably his best game. They lost that game, so no one talked about it, but he had a really solid game there. Then he had moments where he's like, gosh, you know, it's not working out. And one of those games where you were like, man, he's got a lot to learn. Week 16 against the Rams, and all that motion and everything caught it. You know, he got caught with his eyes a couple times. He ended up getting benched. So, okay, what happens when you go against that defense in practice, or you go against that offense in practice every day? And this is what Dennis Allen had to say.
With all the motion on offense, obviously it's something that's being incorporated early. Is it helpful for a defense as you get to work against that every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been incredibly valuable out here in these practices. We're seeing a lot of stuff. And look, quite frankly, we saw the same plays for so long. You know, you kind of knew exactly what to expect every day that you walked out here to practice. And so not only for the players, but the coaches also, like, we're all having to come out here and really have our thinking cap on, because we're seeing a lot of new things. We're seeing a lot of different stuff. And I think that's going to, you know, be very beneficial for us as we, you know, get work on it now into training camp and as we start the regular season.
Yeah, and I do think that's significant, right? Because I think that there are points where it's like, how do you practice against certain schemes, right? How do you actually do that? Like, think about it. Well, you're going to have your scout team trying to come out and replicate the Rams offense? You can't. It doesn't happen. Like, what, you've got to coach that offense. Like, you can't say, like, okay, guys, you go out and run these plays. That's not how it works. So I do think that gives him an advantage. And this is DeMario kind of talking about the same thing.
Man, it's exciting. I think Kubiak, phenomenal person. His name precedes him, so on and off the field. So I was excited to be able to go against that challenge. I think the coaching tree that he comes from is probably upper echelon of the NFL right now. And so you're kind of going against what you typically see from the more explosive offenses in today's game, coming down from that Shanahan tree. And so it's been interesting. I've got a chance to kind of pick his brain and just kind of ask a lot of those things because, you know, as a Mike linebacker, a lot of times when I'm playing in the game, I'm not playing the player so much as I'm playing against the offensive coordinator. And so I think that has been something that has been a more challenging thing. So now kind of having that in the backyard is very helpful, especially like when we get into the season. If I have certain questions, I know I can probably go to him and kind of get his thoughts and maybe get like a little deeper backstory on certain things. So it's been great. It's challenging for us. A lot of the looks that we wouldn't get into the season we're getting now, and so that's exciting.
Right. You know, another thing DeMario talked about was Willie Gay, and one thing that stood out with Willie Gay, the new linebacker, is athleticism, and I think he's going to give the Saints the ability to be in base a lot more often. And you know, that could help, that could hurt in certain instances. I don't know what percentage of the season the Saints are going to be in base, but I would guarantee you that as long as Willie Gay is healthy, it's going to be higher than it has been. Okay, not just Willie Gay, but as long as all 3 linebackers are healthy, it's going to be higher than it was in the past. And we'll see. One other thing from DeMario's comments that he's made clear in the past, whether it be social media, Instagram, whatever, DeMario Davis is a Derek Carr guy. And it's interesting. It makes sense because they're both, you know, men of faith, right? Like, it's very important to their lifestyle. They're holding a night of worship, I think they're calling it. And, you know, I guess if you're trying to figure out how to create a cohesive locker room around your quarterback, around a defense, it's not bad to have a guy like DeMario Davis in your corner, you know? And if you're like, if you're wondering whether like that's just for show, like, no, that's been talked about for a while. Like, this is not something they're just doing. Like they're close. Right. And so, you know, I think if you're a fan of DeMario Davis, hey, that should help that group. Finally, you know, Taysom Hill. We're going to talk a lot more about Taysom Hill in the next episode, the first episode of next week. We're also going to talk a lot about Jake Haener. So I was able to talk to Jake and, you know, talk about some of the work he's done and why he looks the way he does this offseason. I'm not talking about the mustache, but first I do want to talk about Taysom Hill and just one more element of, okay, the defense is adjusting. And this is what he said about Michael Hodges, the linebackers coach, coming to talk to him.
Yeah, I think the more that I do, the harder it is to defend, And so like I said, Clint has been moving me around, and, I had a conversation with Coach Hodges earlier today, and he was like, hey, what, trying to figure out a personnel grouping and what that does for me. And they were trying to figure out what defensively, how are they going to match up, and, what are they going to do against that personnel. So I think the more that we can do, the better and harder it is to defend.
Yeah, and so next episode, I want to talk more about Taysom Hill's role and what that might look like and how that could impact things going forward. But I do think it's telling that you have defensive coaches coming up to offensive players and talking about personnel and schemes, and that's kind of what's happening, right? The defensive coaches and the defensive coaches and the defense are using this opportunity to scheme, to figure out how to play this offense. And I think that's going to be helpful. I really do. And I think that's going to be something we watch throughout camp. Normally, early on, we see the defense ahead of the offense, right? Especially like last year, because everyone's coming in fresh and you're learning a new offense. This year, but the defense knows that there's only so many plays the defense has gone against it. This year, it seems like the offense is ahead of the defense a little bit. You didn't see last year Derek Carr completing 7 of 7 passes in a day. You just didn't. So I think watching how that group grows to face this scheme and grows to adjust to the motion and these new packages and the new personnel, I'm excited to watch it. But all right, again, I know this is a quick episode, but I did want to get you something. I apologize it took so long this late in the week, but we'll be getting back onto a more normal schedule starting next week and going forward until everything gets crazy again, which I'm sure it will. But the OTA availability next week is going to be on Wednesday, so keep that in mind. We won't have any reaction until probably Thursday, or maybe a live stream on Wednesday if there's time. But as always, I appreciate everyone who reaches out, everyone who follows on Twitter. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, hit me up. DMs are open, or just at me, right? Thanks everyone who subscribes on YouTube. Thanks everyone who follows our content on WWL. This is always a tough time of year in terms of like trying to take some time off, but also not miss a beat in terms of everything that's happening. So we'll keep giving you content. I appreciate everyone who follows along and everyone who chimes in, everyone who hangs out and throws us questions in the mailbags. It's always nice, and I always appreciate engaging with y'all. But all right, who dat? Go Saints. Peace, y'all. Peace.